Then she showed up with fake eviction notices and two guys in khakis. When HOA Karen declared war on reality, our quiet neighborhood became the front line. What happens when delusion meets a deed? Sit tight, this suburban showdown gets wild. Let's begin the story. It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday in Red Rock Hills, the kind of morning where time slowed to the rhythm of coffee drips and the rustling leaves outside my open window. My dog Jasper, a loyal golden retriever with more patience than most people I knew, lay curled at my feet as I sipped from a mug labeled "Not Today." World. The sprinkler across the street clicked to life, casting rainbows on Mr. Alston's lawn. I thumbed through a local travel magazine, fantasizing about the national parks I'd one day escape to. But just as I turned the page to an ad for hiking boots, peace shattered like a dropped wine glass. A silver Land Rover came roaring up my gravel driveway, skidding to a stop with such fury that pebbles bounced against my front steps. Jasper bolted upright, barking madly. I stood, heart pounding, and sure if I was about to be robbed, recruited, or struck by lightning. The door to the SUV flung open and out stepped a woman who looked like a fever dream from a suburban nightmare. Oversized sunglasses, a neon green jumpsuit, and enough perfume to choke a cactus. She had a stack of papers clutched in one hand and a rage that practically steamed off her skin. Before I could get a word out, she was up the steps and jabbing the documents into my chest. "You need to leave immediately. This property belongs to me now," she hissed. I blinked at her, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" Jasper growled low, reading the situation faster than I could. The woman, whom I would later discover the neighborhood already called HOA Karen behind closed doors, stared at me like I was a termite infestation. "I bought this house. Private sale. Wired the money. Here's the paperwork," she said, waving the crumpled papers like they were court orders. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Mrs. Lee from next door opened her blinds so hard they cracked. Karen was unfazed by the growing audience. She crossed her arms and planted herself on my front step, as if sheer willpower would rewrite the deed. I glanced at the papers, printed emails, bad grammar, a fake company called Prime Land Realty, a logo that looked like it had been drawn in Microsoft Paint. I felt laughter bubbling in my throat but forced it down. "You got scammed," I said gently. Her eyes narrowed. "Scammed? You're lying because you lost the deal. This is my home now, and I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully before I call the police." "By all means," I replied, crossing my arms. "Please do." And she did. Right there, in my front yard, HOA Karen called 911 and reported a hostile squatter. As her shrill voice echoed across the street, I looked down at Jasper. He tilted his head as if to say, "This is going to be fun," and somehow, I knew he was right. This was no misunderstanding. This was war. The shriek of sirens down Mesa Cactus Drive felt like a thunderclap across the neighborhood. By the time the cruiser rolled to a stop at the edge of my driveway, a full-blown audience had gathered. Red Rock Hills wasn't exactly a hotspot for Drummondville now. Lawn chairs were dragged onto sidewalks, iced teas refilled, and phones were out, recording what many were already calling the Land Rover lunacy. HOA Karen paced in front of my porch like a dictator inspecting her troops, her phone still pressed dramatically to her ear as if she were commanding a fleet. Jasper sat beside me, ears perked, growling low like a drumroll before the clash. I remained standing at the top of the steps, trying to mask my disbelief with calm resolve, but my heart was racing. Officer Rayner stepped out of the patrol car, stocky, suntanned, and perpetually chewing on sunflower seeds. He gave me a familiar nod. "We played poker once at the community rec center." "Colt," he said, voice cautious. "Mind telling me what's going on?" Before I could respond, Karen jumped in like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "This man is trespassing on my property. I bought this house in a private transaction yesterday. I have the documents. He's refusing to vacate." Rayner's brow creased. "Private sale? You got a deed." She shoved her wad of papers at him. Emails, one-sided messages riddled with spelling errors. Royal Homes Direct, complete with a fake watermark that looked like it had been applied with a wet stamp. Rayner flipped through them silently, then looked at me. I calmly handed him my original title deed, notarized and dated 5 years ago. He nodded slowly. "This looks legit, Cole." Karen's voice turned shrill. "What do you mean, looks? That's a forgery. I sent $70,000 to a verified account," my cousin said. "Your cousin a lawyer?" Rayner asked. He's studying law, she snapped. Raynor looked like he was suppressing a laugh. Ma'am, you've been the victim of a scam. This house isn't yours. Her entire body stiffened like stone. I'm not leaving. He's the one who should be arrested for fraud. And that beast of a dog tried to bite me. Jasper barked once in perfect timing, eliciting a ripple of laughter from the neighbors. One teen shouted, "Put her on Netflix." Karen turned a shade of crimson that matched her lipstick. She pointed at me with trembling fury. "You'll regret this. This isn't over. I'll be back with proof." Then, in a dramatic swirl of neon and perfume, she stomped to her SUV and peeled out, her tires carving divots into my gravel. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispering, chuckling, filming TikToks. Officer Raynor shook his head. "You sure you didn't bury a cursed idol in your yard or something?" I managed a weak smile. "Nope, just good old-fashioned real estate." He chuckled grimly. "Better keep your documents close, Colt. I have a feeling she's not done yet." As I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me, I could still feel her words echoing. This isn't over. And something told me she meant it. 2 days passed in uneasy silence. Jasper had returned to his usual patrol of the windows, growling only occasionally at squirrels instead of SUV engines. I had started to believe, foolishly, that maybe HOA Karen had accepted reality and retreated back into whatever Facebook group had fueled her delusion. But peace died again on a dusty Wednesday morning. The thud of a car door slamming jolted me upright. Jasper was already at the window, his growl more feral than usual. I pulled aside the curtain and felt my stomach drop. Karen's silver Land Rover had returned, and this time, she hadn't come alone. Flanking her were 2 men in matching khaki pants and polo shirts with embroidered logos that read as Vic Solutions. Each held a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. Karen stood between them, arms crossed, her smile wide and triumphant. Her lipstick had been redrawn into a sharp slash across her face like war paint. I opened the front door, arms folded, not in the mood for theater. "There he is," Karen announced, pointing like a medieval queen demanding a beheading. "The squatter." One of the clipboard guys stepped forward, eyes downcast as he cleared his throat. "Ah, sir, we've been hired to serve you with an immediate eviction notice. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises or further action will be taken." I stared blankly at him. "Further action like what? You guys gonna arm wrestle me off the porch?" He hesitated. Karen didn't. "This is binding," she declared, brandishing a single, poorly printed sheet of paper. "I had this drawn up by my cousin, who is a certified legal advisor." I took the paper and nearly choked. The title read "A Physical Eviction Notice, Yes," spelled exactly like that in bold Comic Sans. The document was riddled with typos and centered around a cartoon hammer smashing a house. I blinked at it, stunned. "Karen," I said, holding it up like evidence at a crime scene, "this isn't just illegal. This isn't even good fiction." The clipboard men looked deeply uncomfortable. One of them leaned in and whispered, "We thought this was a real gig. Like, actually legal." As if on cue, the now familiar rumble of a police cruiser filled the air. Officer Raynor pulled into the driveway, face etched with the exhaustion of a man who had seen this movie before and hated the sequel. He stepped out, taking the flyer from my hand. He read 2 lines and sighed. "Ma'am, this isn't an eviction notice. This is barely a flyer for a school play." Karen gasped. "Are you saying my cousin lied to me?" Raynor didn't even look up. "I'm saying your cousin needs to stay off Reddit." The clipboard guys mumbled something about not wanting to be involved in lawsuits and practically ran back to their van. Karen stood alone, shaking with indignation. "You'll all be sorry," she screamed. "This neighborhood is run by liars and criminals, but I will have justice." She spun on her heel and peeled out of the driveway again, gravel spraying like a firework. Jasper barked twice. And just like that, the circus left town, but we all knew the tent was still standing. By Friday, I had replaced the batteries in my doorbell camera, added to more floodlights, and set up motion detectors around the perimeter. Jasper had taken to sleeping beside the front door, twitching at every passing headlight. The air in Red Rock Hills felt thick, not with fear, but with tension, the kind that precedes a monsoon or a lawsuit. That morning, I got a call from Mesa Ridge Title and Escrow Company that had helped me close on the house years ago. The receptionist, Claire, spoke in the calm, overly polite tone of someone trying not to escalate an already absurd situation. "Mr. Maddox," she said, We've had a woman calling repeatedly. She's demanding we release her deed and claiming there's a clerical error listing you as the owner. I nearly dropped my coffee. She said she was going to contact the media, file federal charges, and something about bringing the FBI in to seize the house, Claire continued, the edge of nervous amusement creeping into her voice. I assume you know who I'm talking about. HOA Karen, I muttered. Yes, Claire said. That's what she called herself. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the kitchen wall. It was official. Karen wasn't just unhinged. She was weaponizing bureaucracy. Less than an hour later, her Land Rover crept back into my driveway, this time as slowly as a predator stalking prey. She stepped out dressed in a charcoal pantsuit like she'd just walked off a low-budget courtroom drama set. Under one arm she carried a fox leather briefcase, which bulged suspiciously with papers. Before she could knock, I opened the door. Afternoon, she said, syrup sweet. I'm here to offer you one last opportunity to vacate before I take this to court. You've already called the police, I replied. You've already sent fake eviction notices. You harassed the title office. What's next, skywriting? Karen didn't flinch. You'll see. She marched off, heels clacking across my driveway. Jasper growled as she disappeared around the side of the house, likely to take more evidence photos with her cracked phone camera. That night, a single envelope was taped to my front door. It was printed in all caps, filled with bold fonts and wild accusations. According to this letter, I was being sued for illegal occupancy, emotional distress, theft of property, and, bafflingly, theft of a dream life. Attached was what appeared to be a court summons, but the bottom corner still bore the watermark of a free document generator. The same site, I later discovered, also offered wizard certifications if you completed 3 surveys. I laughed aloud briefly, because beneath the humor, the letter chilled me. This woman wasn't just deluded, she was obsessed. And obsessed people don't quit. The war had moved from the driveway to the paper trail, and Karen wasn't slowing down, she was just getting warmed up. I'd had enough of the fake documents, the drive-bys, the whispered threats. So, I did the only thing that made sense anymore. I invited HOA Karen to a formal meeting at the Mesa Ridge Title and Escrow office downtown. I also invited Officer Rayner to sit in. I wanted everything on record, no more front yard showdowns or sidewalk screaming matches. If she wanted war, it was going to be fought under fluorescent lights and witness signatures. Karen showed up 15 minutes early. She burst through the glass doors like she was storming the Bastille, oversized sunglasses, dramatic black coat, and a massive 3-ring binder that she dropped on the conference table with a thud. If I hadn't known better, I'd have sworn she thought she was revealing state secrets. I sat at the opposite end, hands folded, Jasper's photo on my phone face up beside me for emotional support. Officer Rayner leaned against the wall near the coffee machine, already looking exhausted. Ms. Harmon, the title company's lead legal advisor, entered with a small folder and a steely expression that said she'd seen far too many Karen types in her career. Shall we begin? She asked flatly. Karen dove in head first. She launched into a breathless, nearly 15-minute tirade about corruption, injustice, and how she'd found a life-changing real estate opportunity on Facebook. She claimed she had wired $70,000 to a seller overseas, and that her cousin, who she now admitted was not a lawyer but had watched a ton of courtroom shows, had assured her the deal was legit. Ms. Harmon remained unfazed. When Karen finally stopped talking, she slid a single sheet across the table. This, she said, tapping the document, is the certified title deed showing Mr. Maddox has owned the property for over 5 years. No transfer was filed, requested, or authorized. What you experienced was a fraudulent online scam. Karen's face twisted. Then explain this, she screeched, flipping open her binder and yanking out grainy screenshots of my house, ones that had been posted to sketchy classified ads. Captions like, "Haunted mansion for sale, no paperwork needed. Private deal, trust-based transaction only." The absurdity hung in the room like smoke. Ms. Harmon barely concealed a smirk. Ma'am, these listings are clearly fake. They have no legal basis. No real estate transaction is valid without county records and notarized deeds. What you fell for was an internet scam. Karen's mouth opened and closed, her brain visibly short-circuiting. Officer Rayner, seizing the moment, leaned forward. You could file a report against the scammer. But if you continue filing false claims against Mr. Maddox, you could face legal action." Karen exploded. "You're all in on it. This whole town is corrupt. The title company's fake. She pointed at me. "You're probably practicing sorcery or something. No one just owns a house like that." "Ma'am," Miss Harmon cut in firmly, standing, "this meeting is over. Any further harassment will be reported and prosecuted." Karen clutched her binder and stormed out, muttering about conspiracy networks and exposing the truth. Officer Rayner turned to me and muttered, "You might want a lawyer up anyway." Something tells me that wasn't her last binder. And I believed him. Because humiliation wasn't the end for Karen. It was gasoline. 1 week after the title company debacle, I came home to find a thick manila envelope stuffed into my mailbox, the flap barely hanging on. My name was scribbled across the front in all caps with enough pressure to indent the paper. Jasper sniffed it like it might explode. Inside was something even more ridiculous than I imagined. Karen had officially filed a lawsuit. A real, court-stamped complaint filed with the county clerk and everything. She was suing me for illegal occupancy, theft of property, emotional trauma, and the piece de resistance, the unlawful possession of her dream life. Attached were 50 pages of rambling grievances, screenshots from Facebook listings, a copy of her scammer's emails, and of course a picture of herself standing in front of my house with a triumphant grin, as if that somehow proved ownership. The lawsuit demanded $2 million in damages and immediate forfeiture of my property. I stood there in stunned silence, groceries forgotten in the back seat of my car. Jasper barked once, his tail stiff with tension, as if to say, "You've got to be kidding me." I didn't even set the milk down before calling my lawyer. Mr. Ellis was calm, collected, and looked more like a retired librarian than someone who went to war in courtrooms. After a quiet "oh dear," he reviewed the paperwork and said simply, "She's serious and severely unwell." The hearing was scheduled faster than I expected. When the day came, the courthouse buzzed with low murmurs and curious stares. News of the crazy Red Rock Hills lawsuit had clearly spread beyond our little street. I sat at the defendant's table beside Mr. Ellis, dressed in a clean suit and trying not to throw up. Across from us, Karen sat Alana, her oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, her arms wrapped around another battered binder full of nonsense. She represented herself. The judge, a stern but fair older man, entered with the kind of wary expression that said he'd seen everything and now regretted that assumption. "Ms. Karen," he began, eyeing the stack of paper beside her, "you are representing yourself today." "Yes, Your Honor," she declared, standing tall. No lawyer would take this Cassetti were all too scared of the truth. A quiet snort rolled through the courtroom before the bailiff hissed for silence. Karen's opening statement was a theatrical mess of conspiracy theories, internet quotes, and personal grievances. She accused the title company of laundering deeds, the police department of gender bias, and me of dark home binding sorcery. She presented screenshots, printed papal receipts, and at one point, a horoscope that said she was destined to claim her rightful kingdom. When it was our turn, Mr. Ellis calmly laid out the real deed, the notarized title, and the entire chain of ownership. It took less than 15 minutes. The judge reviewed it, then turned to Karen. "Ms. Karen, can you provide any legal documentation showing ownership?" She rummaged through her binder, pulled out a crumpled email with broken grammar and a PayPal transaction labeled house payment, and held it up like a victory flag. The judge sighed. "This is not how real estate works." Karen's face collapsed. But she didn't go quietly. She stood and shouted about justice, destiny, and how she'd take this to the Supreme Court if necessary. The judge simply nodded toward Mr. Ellis. "Motion to dismiss." "Motion to dismiss," Ellis said smoothly. The gavel cracked once. "Case dismissed with prejudice. Defendant is awarded legal costs. Plaintiff is warned against filing any further frivolous lawsuits." Karen exploded in a storm of muttering and binder packing, storming out of the courtroom after tripping on the hem of her own blazer. I sat in stunned silence as the laughter outside rippled through the marble hallway like an aftershock. We had won, but Karen was far from done. By the time the courthouse dust settled, I should have felt victorious, but I didn't. Yes, the judge had dismissed Karen's lawsuit with prejudice. Yes, I'd been awarded legal costs. And yes, she'd tripped on her blazer on the way out and nearly face-planted into the exit sign, drawing muffled laughter from the crowd. But even with all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. I was right. My lawyer, Mr. Ellis, called me 2 days later. "Colt, we need to go on the offensive. Enough is enough." He filed a countersuit on my behalf: harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I didn't want to kick someone when they were already down, but this wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. Karen had crossed every line, and without real consequences, she'd just keep escalating. Strangely, she didn't even contest the suit. Whispers around Red Rock Hills painted the picture. Karen was broke. Between court fees, filing costs, and whatever scammer had siphoned away her dream home money, her finances had collapsed. Rumor had it she was trying to sell her actual house she legally owned in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. I didn't celebrate, not publicly, but I'll admit, the moment was surreal when neighbors I barely knew began stopping me on the sidewalk to congratulate me. Some shook my hand. Others brought Jasper treats and called him Red Rock's real guard dog. It was like surviving a storm together had made us a stronger community. Then came the flyer. Folded and slipped into every mailbox on our block, it read, "Massive yard sale. 1 day only. Karen's treasures. Antiques, collectibles, rare items." It was printed in glittery font, and the word treasures was underlined 3 times. Naturally, I showed up. The yard sale took place in the vacant lot at the end of the street. Folding tables were covered with what could only be described as desperation: dusty candles, broken air fryers, DVDs from the early 2000s, and an old karaoke machine with a sticky note that read, "Works great, just needs faith." But the highlight was a framed certificate at the front of her table proclaiming, "Top Negotiator 2024, awarded by Masterclass Real Estate Institute Online." Next to it, someone had sneakily taped a handwritten sign, "Certified in losing property deals." Karen sat behind her table, sunglasses on despite the shade, lips pinched into a furious line. She didn't speak. Not to buyers, not to gawkers, not even to a kid who tried to trade a juice box for a lava lamp. Then came the final blow. Mrs. Arlene Henderson, our 82-year-old neighborhood legend, walked up to Karen's table, picked up a tacky ceramic frog holding a sign that said, "Bless this mess," and asked, loudly and clearly, "Does this come with a fake deed too, or do I wire money to your cousin in Albania?" The laughter was instant and uncontainable. Karen turned beet red, slammed her binder shut, and began hurriedly packing her unsold junk into the trunk of her SUV. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look back. But as she drove away, gravel spitting, muffler wheezing, you felt something shift. The street didn't just feel relieved. It felt healed. After the disaster that was Karen's yard sale, Red Rock Hills felt different, lighter, like we'd all been living under a storm cloud we didn't realize was there until it finally drifted away. People walked slower on the sidewalks, waved longer, lingered in conversations they used to rush through. Jasper, once ever watchful at the window, now dozed lazily in sunspots like a dog who knew his patrol days were behind him. I wasn't the only one who noticed the change. Yard signs bloomed across lawns like spring flowers: "Welcome home, community strong," even one with a cartoon dog in sunglasses labeled "Neighborhood Security Jasper Approved." The tale of HOA Karen became neighborhood legend. Everyone had their favorite moment. Mr. Delgado loved the courtroom scene where Karen accused the judge of being part of a real estate Illuminati. Teenagers down the block had made a parody video reenacting her fake eviction stunt, with one of them in a pink bathrobe yelling, "You'll regret this," into a hairbrush. But the biggest shift came during the next block meeting. It started with light chatter about speed bumps and holiday decorations, but then someone brought up an idea that had been circulating for weeks, commemorating what we'd all survived. At first, it was half a joke, but then it wasn't. A week later, a small wooden sign was unveiled at the corner of Mesa Cactus Drive and Pinion Loop. It read, "Welcome to Reality Lane. Population, sane people only." We laughed, cheered, and took turns posing beside it like it was a national monument. Someone even photoshopped Jasper into the picture wearing aviators and a sheriff's badge. It wasn't just about mocking Karen. It was about marking a turning point. Karen had been a force of choice, but in the end, she had done what no community potluck ever could. She united us. Through sheer absurdity and shared outrage, we'd all found each other. People who once just nodded at one another were now borrowing tools, dog-sitting, and organizing yard games. I found myself more involved too. I joined the neighborhood watch not out of fear, but out of pride. We had built something real, something solid. Karen, meanwhile, had vanished. Rumors swirled. Some said she moved to a gated community to towns over and was already butting heads with their HOA president. Others claimed she was trying to start a podcast called Justice for Karen, which had one listener and no guests. Honestly, I didn't care. Let her scream into the void if she wanted. We had earned our peace. That evening, as the sun bled into the desert horizon, I sat on my porch with a cold drink in hand, Jasper resting beside me, his head on my foot. I watched kids ride bikes under string lights that someone had hung between mailboxes. For the first time in a long time, Red Rock Hills felt like home. And no self-declared queen in neon polyester was ever going to change that again. Life, after all the chaos, had finally found a rhythm again in Red Rock Hills. Gone were the days of Karen-fueled madness, drive-by screaming, the binder slams, the fake evictions. What remained was a peaceful hum of everyday life. Jasper resumed his role as the porch king, surveying his domain like a retired general. Neighbors no longer whispered about lawsuits. They laughed about them. One morning, while refilling Jasper's water bowl, I glanced across the street and saw something beautiful. Mr. and Mrs. Tran, who hadn't spoken to each other in public for months, were gardening together, chuckling as their toddler sprayed them both with the hose. A few houses down, the same teen who once mocked Karen's "You'll regret this" speech had opened a lemonade stand with a sign that read, "Every cup comes with a free title search." Karen's meltdown had turned into mythology. We were living in the afterglow of a shared absurdity, and for the first time, it felt like our cul-de-sac wasn't just a place to live, it was a community. The best part, our monthly block party took on new meaning. That first one after the storm, a full-blown celebration, grills smoked with the scent of ribs and burgers, kids zipped through the street with glow sticks and bubble guns. Someone even rented a bounce house. And, yes, a neighbor crafted a life-sized Karen scarecrow complete with fake legal documents in one hand and a cell phone in the other. It was the hit of the night. But beneath the jokes, something deeper settled in: gratitude. We had all watched the line between absurdity and danger get crossed. Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she had nearly dismantled someone's life with lies and false confidence. And yet, through shared support and a little legal muscle, we came through it together. I talked to people I'd never spoken to before, learned their stories, swapped tips about home repairs and security cameras. There was less suspicion now, more openness. Kids played longer outside. Porch lights stayed on later. Even Jasper, who used to react to every SUV engine with dread, now only lifted his head once before going back to sleep. One night, sitting around a fire pit in my backyard with a few neighbors, someone asked the question that had lingered in all of us. What do we do if she comes back? I took a sip of my drink, scratched Jasper behind the ears, and said simply, we show her the door together. The others nodded. Because that was the truth. Karen hadn't just failed to take my house. She'd helped fortify an entire neighborhood against nonsense. We didn't just survive her, we became stronger because of her. And if she ever rolled back into town, binder in hand, she'd be facing more than just one homeowner. She'd be facing reality lane. It had been nearly a month since anyone had seen or heard from HOA Karen. Red Rock Hills, once shaken by her antics, had returned to life like a tree regrowing after a wildfire, stronger, more vibrant, and rooted deeper than before. The reality lane sign stood proudly at the end of our street, a permanent reminder of the madness we'd endured and the unity we'd forged. Even the weather seemed to play along. The days were golden and breezy, the kind of spring warmth that made everything feel like a fresh start. Jasper was back to lounging lazily on the porch, tail thumping to the rhythm of the wind chimes, no longer on edge but still alert, as if part of him was waiting for one last plot twist. And then, one afternoon, it arrived. A single unmarked envelope slid under my front door. No name, no return address. Just thick ivory paper, sealed with an obnoxious glob of purple wax that had the faint imprint of what looked like a butterfly. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single sheet, typed in narrow font, reading, "To the thief who stole my destiny. You may have won the battle, but I was chosen for that home. Enjoy your ill-gotten peace. I will find a new path. I've joined a movement, bigger, stronger, smarter." And next time, I won't be alone. Karen. I read it twice, then once more, slower. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. It was a final flare fired into the sky, a last gasp from someone still clinging to their delusions like driftwood in a sea of reality. Karen hadn't moved on, she'd simply redirected her madness somewhere new. Somewhere that, God help them, wasn't here. I burned the letter in my fire pit that evening. Neighbors gathered again that night, just like before, sipping drinks, telling jokes, and tossing extra logs on the fire. I read Karen's letter aloud before I dropped it in the flames. Laughter rippled through the group. No fear, no anger, just a shared sigh of closure. Even Mr. Thompson, who used to wince at every car passing his driveway, raised a toast. To resilience, he said, and to never letting the crazies win. As the fire crackled and stars blinked into the sky, I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the homes that now felt less like buildings and more like shields were tested, but standing strong together. Jasper rested his head on my lap, eyes closed, breathing slow, and I knew, deep in my chest, that no matter what storms rolled in next, no matter who tried to tear us apart or trespass on what we'd built, we were ready. Because we weren't just residents anymore. We were a community. We were Reality Lane. And no Karen on earth could break that. Lesson for the audience. When someone tries to bulldoze reality with delusion, the most powerful defense isn't rage, it's unity, truth, and patience. The story of HOA Karen teaches us that even the loudest, most persistent voices of chaos can override facts, community strength, or the law. It's a reminder that you don't need to match madness with madness. Instead, stand your ground with dignity, trust in the truth, and let the absurd collapse under its own weight. In the end, it's not just about protecting your home, it's about building a community